Hey there, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of the My Friends Are Amazing podcast. Just a reminder that you can find episodes of this podcast and all the other ones on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. I actually think they're on many more, but I don't really know all their names. Anyway, please search for My Friends Are Amazing on any of the major podcast networks, and please give me a subscribe. In podcast news this week, I think I'm going to actually be recording 2 guests today, not at the same time, but one today, right now, and then another one later tonight. I won't release both at the same time, but I'm super excited to record 2 in one day. So this actually is the new evolution, and I think I'm going to actually get to use my remote Zoom recorder for the in-person interview that I'm going to do later today. Today's podcast is brought to you by Social Imposter, reputation management for social networking profiles. If you're used to hearing to the podcast, you know I'm going to say, but Bob, what are you talking about? What the heck does all this mean? Well, let me tell you what Social Imposter is. Social Imposter is a customized service utilizing proprietary technology that finds and mitigates the removal of fake social network pages on behalf of high-profile brands, actors, athletes, models, musicians, politicians, military officers, business people, members of the clergy, and their management teams. So basically, if you have a social media page that represents you or your brand, and there might be people out there impersonating you and doing awful things in the name of your personal identity or your brand, you need to look to the people at Social Imposter. A huge thanks to Social Imposter for being my first podcast sponsor, and be sure to check them out at socialimpostor.com. And that's imposter, impostor.com. Today's guest is Erica Quisenberry, and the bio that she sent me reads as follows. Erica saves her pennies to travel the world, see new things, experience new cultures, hike new terrain, meet new people, and understand new perspectives. It makes her uncomfortable, and she loves it. Aside from traveling, she's obsessed with podcasts. Well, that's good because she's going to be on this one. Plant-based eating, craft cocktails, being out in nature, and making things from scratch. To fund her travels and various hobbies, Erica owns and operates her own company, Studio RedDesigns, where she works as a UX UI consultant, partnering with companies, agencies, and developers all over the world to craft digital solutions that align business goals with user goals to achieve maximum results. She's the co-founder, or she is a co-founder of Skrift, an online Umbraco community magazine, and she's also a 2016 Umbraco MVP winner and a certified Umbraco Expert. She's a huge advocate for decreasing the gender gap in the tech industry, and that is definitely something that we're going to discuss in the podcast today. So, without further ado, Erica Quessenberry. Hey, Erica, how's it going?
Hey, it's going pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing really well. First of all, thanks for being on the show. This is very amazing to have people. I think I'm batting 1,000 when I ask people, they say yes. So
that's awesome.
Looking forward to that first no, just to see how I take that rejection. But so far, so good.
Yeah, I don't think that you're going to get a no, to be honest. I think people are quite excited about the opportunity to be on a podcast. So
I got a hard maybe by this guy that I'm going to try to rope into recording later tonight. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, and he's actually local. So he's kind of ditching me like very hard local.
Right. Oh, bummer. Well, maybe he'll come through. It'll be good.
Yeah. So, all right, before we talked today, you had mentioned that you were doing some emergency tech support for your dad. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He calls when he can't get his computer to work, and I'm like, Dad, I'm not a hardware person. So, yeah. Anyway.
So did you blow him off or did you fix it?
No. I don't know what's wrong with it. He was trying to do an upgrade on his Mac, and it failed like mid-process, and now he just gets a black screen and nothing happened. So I was like, hey, try this. That's all I know. And that didn't work. So I was like, hey, how about you call those nice guys at Apple? Ask them. That
doesn't sound like a very Mac thing. I thought it just works.
I know, it does. I've never, ever... Oh, I need some wood to knock on. Okay. I've never, ever had a problem with my Mac, and I've been on a Mac for, I don't know, 15 years maybe. So I'm kind of at a loss.
And I'm mostly kidding when I say that. I started on a Mac years and years and years and years ago. So we actually had some of the when Mac like open sourced their their platform, power systems or something like that. I can't remember what they were. They were like off-brand Macintosh, which was weird. So you were probably not even doing this stuff when that happened.
Probably not. Our first computer when I was little was a Macintosh. I do remember that. Played lots of Oregon Trail. Does that date me? That probably dates me.
Was it an iMac though, or was it like a Mac Classic with the tiny little screen?
I think it was a Mac Classic with the tiny little screen. I don't have like strong memories of it, but I have some memories of it. I'm not a big enough computer nerd, I don't think, to like recall. I don't know. I read some people's writings or whatever, and they know the name and the brand and the year and the serial number of every computer they've ever had. And I'm like, whoa, that I don't know. So.
Yeah, I'm not quite into that either.
Yeah.
So you do work in tech, though. I mean, is that fair to say?
I do.
Do we call it tech?
Yes.
Okay. So tell everybody what it is that you do.
I am a UX UI consultant, mostly for the web and anything web related or app related. And what that means is I work very closely with businesses around the world and figure out what their business goals are and how they want to grow. And then we do exercises to figure out their target audience, who they currently are, who they want them to be, and how do we and what that target audience wants to achieve on the website or with the app, and how do we align that with the business goals to up their ROI. So that is what I do, kind of in a nutshell.
All right. So before we dive into like how long and this is actually a little bit for me too, and it's an ongoing conversation that I've been part of and can't contribute to very much. What is the difference or what is UX UI? Like,
to me, they kind of all blur together, but they are different disciplines. Like UI, user interface, kind of falls under UX, which is the user experience. So user experience is more like the user's, not only their journey through your website or your app or something like that, but it's the emotions that it evokes and kind of how you feel when you're interacting with it, and just kind of entails the whole experience. Whereas the UI is more of the interface. It's the design, the colors, the typography, which again lends back to the experience that you have on the site. So I started out in UI before user experience became that much of a thing a few years back, and then have kind of morphed into both. And because I've worked at a very small agency before and I freelance now, I do both. I've never been able to work as a separate discipline in that. I suppose unless end client hires me to just do UI, and they won't listen to me when I tell them they actually need both. So, yes.
So when someone hires you for UI, I mean, is that, am I like in a layman's term, are they hiring you to do the design of the site, like the visual design?
Yeah, and those are the projects that I struggle the most on, because they usually come to me with not a lot of assets and they go, just make me something awesome. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. You know, like how do you, how do you design a website if you have no background on it? You know, like I don't know what the goals of the site are. How do I make it awesome? You know, so I don't know. But there are sites out there, like I spend a ridiculous amount of time looking at new sites and whatever the different trends going on. And there are some sites that I hit and I'm like, this is beautiful. And then you try to start using it and you're like, I have no idea what's going on. So there definitely are some very strong UI designers out there. Let's just put it that way.
What would you say, and where I'm deviating here, so like what would you say are some of the strongest sites out there I guess you'd have to know about the users to be able to comment on the user experience. Yeah. See, that's the hard part.
Yeah. It is really hard because there's like, I really like to do data-driven designs, but a lot of people don't have enough data collected, and they're not willing to spend a week collecting data and doing user interviews and stuff like that. And I find that really frustrating too, because they think of it as an added expense, where actually it tends to cut expenses in the long run, because you're not having to do so many redos as you're designing and building out the site, if that makes sense, because you're basing your decisions off the data that you've already collected. So if I'm not able to do that on a project, I try to at least follow best practices. But again, that's hard because what might work well for Amazon might not work well for somebody else's e-commerce store, or what might work well for Facebook might not work well for some other kind of community chat platform or whatever. And speaking of Facebook, it's really interesting. Like maybe I shouldn't even broach this topic because it's kind of a soapbox for me. But the whole hamburger menu thing, like I absolutely hate it. And Facebook, to my knowledge, is the one that introduced that in their app, and they trained billions of people how to use it. And then they decided that wasn't really a great idea. And so they got rid of it. Like, you don't see it. You don't see them use it anymore. But like the rest of the world is still using it. Like it's the only solution for a mobile menu. And it drives me crazy. And do I use it? Yes, because a lot of times it gets mandated on me that that's the way it has to be. But I feel like we could be more creative in coming up with navigation solutions if we weren't so lazy and just tucked it under that stupid hamburger menu. But so it's examples like that. If you don't want to spend the time researching your own audience and how they respond to your site, and you just try to follow best practices, and then you latch onto these things that the big companies are doing. But if you watch those big companies, they're constantly testing and changing. And we tend to latch onto one or two things, and then it persists in the entire industry. And you're just like, really? But anyway.
Right. And not everybody wants to spend the time and the resources to do the, to do the constant evolution, even if it's just following a big fish in the pond. No one can do that, redo at the rates that they do.
So it's better just to do it on your own to begin with. That's my plug for, hey, do your own user research.
Not to focus on the hamburger menu, but I mean, so what, in your experience working with people and working with companies, like what alternatives have you explored that users have responded well to?
That is a good question. I actually am usually off projects before I get to follow up. So I always pitch projects like, hey, I want to stay involved and help you measure, because we always set KPIs, key performance indicators, and goals that we're going to target to make sure this redesign is working. But they usually take that over in-house afterwards. And so I never get to see how they follow up, which is another frustration of mine, that they bring me in for such a small piece of the project, and they don't let me carry on typically. I mean, they might circle back around in a year and be like, hey, we think that we should blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. So.
But you're not getting a lot of experience with gathering data, like at the beginning stages of projects where you could identify, like in the mobile prototype or the mobile view prototype or the mobile view paper, the hamburger menu, like you're not finding, oh wait, this one actually performed so much better and it wasn't a hamburger. It was a...
Not so far. I think I'm just going to automatically build that in. And when I'm going to cherry pick a project and build that in. I actually am working on a project right now. I think we talked about doing some user testing on that one. So, hopefully maybe I can stipulate, like, can we specifically test that hamburger icon? But yeah, so if that actually happens, and that's being controlled by the company, but that feedback loop should get back around to me on that one. So I can hopefully learn from that one, how that's going. But yeah, it's interesting that the industry is shifting this way to data-driven design. But it's only larger companies so far that are buying off on that. And maybe the ones funded by venture capital, they're actually doing a lot of that as well. So they're actually interesting. Their websites are interesting to watch and how they evolve for that. But in terms of like the middle size to smaller clients, they haven't quite seen, well, maybe they recognize the benefits, but they're not willing to jump on board yet and dive into that themselves. And part of me thinks that some of it is they kind of don't want to know. They think, well, this is how I want it done. And so I don't want to be told I'm wrong. I feel like I'm running into that a little bit too.
Yeah, I think they don't want to hear the cold hard facts that indeed, doing this work up front could actually prevent you from having to do the once every 18 months to 36-month redesign.
Right. Yeah. It's just interesting. And I'm learning to pick my battles too, I guess, because I get very passionate on some things, and some things I just toss my hands up and I'm like, it's not worth it. We'll do it your way. And then when you circle back around to me in a year and say, this isn't working, I'm going to have a little bit of a, I told you so in there, but that's the way it goes. So yeah.
So what are you doing? Like, how are you as an independent business owner and kind of like a solopreneur, like how are you sourcing business? Like, how does that model work for you?
That's an interesting question. So I am in year 2, or did I just start year 3? I've almost completed year 2 of the freelance thing. And it's been kind of a slow ramp up for me, somewhat intentionally because I haven't put a ton of effort into it. I will be honest, but, I have spent the last, 6 or so years building up a pretty solid network of developers. So I feel like in that respect, I've positioned myself fairly well. And so I am leveraging my relationship with those developers to source jobs. So I have maybe like one of the client that I would consider my own. And then the rest, I either partner with larger agencies and I do overflow work for them, or I partner with other solopreneurs in the development world. And anytime they get a project that needs design, they will tap me, and then we'll work together on that project. So that's kind of how I'm handling it, I guess. And so far, it's been working out really, really well. For that. So I also most of these developers come from the Umbraco world, where I have spent quite a lot of time learning Umbraco. And I also know front-end development. I don't do it very often, but I do pick up those jobs on occasion as well, because I think it makes me a much better designer if I understand how it all gets put together. And I'm hoping it also means that the developers that I work with, they like me better because I don't do really stupid shit.
Right. You're not just like designing and dumping.
Yes, exactly. Like I understand, like I could code it if I needed to. I don't want to, but I could because I understand how it all gets put together. So hopefully that helps them in the long run as well. So so I just have been cultivating my relationships with other developers, I guess. And a lot of it's word of mouth.
That's the best way, honestly. I mean, yeah. And it's obviously supporting your lifestyle with all your travels.
Yes, it definitely does. My ultimate goal is to be able to work while I travel, and I have not mastered that yet because I get so involved in where I am that I'm like, I don't want to work.
So that's so funny because that was going to be one of my questions too. So you're telling me like that a lot of that. So Erica's another one of these people that, just like Kevin last week, it seems like I see Erica in different parts of the world more so than I would see her like in her part of the, like I've never actually seen Erica in her part of the world. But like, so you're telling me and all that traveling that you do, you're actually just out there traveling. You're not like doing the digital nomad thing.
Yes. No, I'm not mastered that yet.
I hate you even more now. Oh,
yeah. It's, I mean, that's my ultimate goal, but I get so caught up in like my current location and like, I don't know. I am like out all day, either hiking or exploring or chatting with new people, meeting new people. And, you know, at night, by the time I get back to wherever I'm staying for the night, I'm exhausted. And the last thing I want to do is spend 4 or 5 hours on a computer. I just want to go to bed. So, so it's been, you know, it's been, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, maybe an unhealthy cycle of frantically working at home for a couple of weeks and really long hours and late nights trying to stay on top of projects and then taking a week plus off to go explore something. So,
but are you talking like 20 hours or like, I mean, when you say working frantically for, you know, a couple of weeks, I mean, this still sounds pretty like appealing.
I could see how some people might be. But I have a mental capacity and I can't. I mean, I can't work 10-hour days every day. I mean, maybe that doesn't sound like a lot to people, but it's a lot to me.
I think 10 is a lot.
But I can't even do, like, even if I kept it to 6 or 8 hours a day, like I can't even do 7 days straight of that. Like my mind just turns to jelly and I'm not productive. So like and I don't know, I'm also a huge introvert. Most people who meet me would not know that because I'm a completely different person when I travel, but like I don't know if the introvert thing plays into it, but I just have to like shut down and space out or read a book or watch TV or I also do a lot of crafty things as a way to decompress. So, or go for a walk or something. And I just can't, I don't know. I can't do that 7 days a week, cram it all in thing, but I'm having to, or that's my current struggle because I am having to do something along those lines because I can't seem to make myself work when I'm traveling. But a wise person recently told me that to do the digital nomad thing better, you have to be in a location for like a month. And I have only been doing like a week to 2 weeks at a time. So,
and you and I were talking about, you're going to try to maybe test that soon. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, hopefully I will follow through on this and just not be all talk. But there is an Umbraco festival spinning up in Australia in February next year. And so I was thinking, I went to Australia and New Zealand last year and I absolutely loved it. So I was thinking maybe I'd go for like a month or something, maybe longer. I don't know. But my current mental thought is a month in either Australia or New Zealand, catch the festival and see. But my deal with myself is if I do that, like I have to pick one location and stay there for the entire month. Like I can't jump cities. I mean, I could do day trips or weekend trips or whatever, but like I actually have to like find a place to stay there and work and not just be out every day or constantly moving locations. So, and I'll see if that works better. But yeah, so that's my current.
And probably if you were staying that long, you'd probably have to work to get a little bit of an influx of cash while you were there.
Well, exactly. So, and I think that's the other thing is when I travel, I'm usually on the go a lot. So when you're staying in a new place every night or every other night, because you're moving about, like that's also exhausting in itself. So if I rented an apartment or a flat or a room or something for like a month and I'm like, this is it, this is me, I'm living here. So hopefully I would, it seems more feasible to buckle down and work at that point. But
and that one,
then again, who knows?
That one's in February, right?
Because yes. Yeah.
So would you go like a half month before, or would you like, do you think festival at tail end, festival beginning, festival middle?
Oh, I hadn't thought that far in advance. When is it? I
think it is end of February. Right? Yeah.
I would probably go early February because I live in the Pacific Northwest and it's just January and February are just depressing. So, and it would be summer down in the Southern Hemisphere. So yeah, I would probably want to get out.
It's so funny because one of my show notes says, how far out do you plan your trips? And it doesn't sound like you plan them out very far in advance.
Not very, no. So the UK, so I also went to the UK like Kevin and Bob did. And let's see, when was the festival? November 4th. I think I bought my plane tickets on October 13th, maybe.
Well, that's not too bad. I think I was just a little bit earlier in October.
A couple weeks. Oh, okay. I thought that was pretty close, but I couldn't make up my mind if I wanted to spend all that money to go all the way over there. It's such a long flight. But I also stayed longer. I stayed almost 2 weeks because I can't face that flight that soon. So
that was the main motivator. So I saw you for almost 7 days. And then you went farther north. Is that right?
Yes. So actually, one of my projects right now, I'm working with a small agency, and they they're a completely remote team, but they're loosely based out of Scotland. So and the client for the project that I'm working with them on is in Edinburgh. So I said, hey, if I came over for UK Fest and stayed longer, do you guys want some FaceTime other than the video chats that we do? And they were like, ooh, actually, that'd be great. So that made the trip worth it for me, to spend a couple of days with them doing some planning and sketching and what have you. So yeah.
And do you do the video chat stuff a lot with your clients, since they are pretty much everywhere?
I do with this particular project. We do, it seems like about weekly or something like that, every 10 days at the most. And I love it. And they're the only ones I do it with. I do phone calls with other people, but I really like the video chat thing. Yes, I have to make sure that I'm up and showered, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I don't know. It's just to be able to actually watch somebody's facial expressions and have it almost feels like you're having an in-person meeting. And I think it helps the project a lot. So I might see if I can institute that on other projects as well.
What's the video chat tool of choice?
We use Zoom, I think.
Yep. Yeah. Zoom's pretty popular.
Yeah.
Kevin and I do a couple times a week in the afternoons. We do the keep each other company, since we're both remote workers.
I should get in on that.
Yeah, we're scheming. We're trying to come up with some kind of network. So
perfect.
Stay tuned for that.
Perfect.
So in your travels, well, first of all, wait a second. I got to go back to this too. So you talked to those guys in Edinburgh. Yep. And what time do you have to get up to talk to them, being on the West Coast?
Yeah, we do. It's 8 a.m. for me. So it's 4 p.m.
Oh, that's not bad.
So it actually is fine. But then when we were out having drinks one night when I was there, and I mentioned that I wasn't a morning person, so they were all like, oh no, we're so sorry. And I'm like, no, it's totally fine. If you had called for 6 a.m. meetings, I might squawk a little bit, but 8 is reasonable. So I always feel that actually, because there's been some meetings Friday. So it's 8 a.m. Friday and it's 4 p.m. Friday afternoon. I was like, I'm so sorry for having an end of the day Friday meeting. Because actually one of the guys is in Eastern Europe. So he's an hour ahead of that even. So 5 o'clock on Friday. Wow. And he's like on a video chat with me. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. Are you drinking a beer while we're chatting? Because I would not judge.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, so truth, do you go back to bed after that 8 a.m. call or do you just kick it in for the day?
Yeah, I am. Even though I'm not a morning person, if I can get myself up, I am actually most productive between probably 7 and 10 a.m. It's as the day goes on that I start failing. So,
how do you wrestle with that? Not being a morning person, but being most productive in the morning.
I don't know. Right now, I'm trying to capitalize on jet lag. So actually, today is the first day that I actually slept till 7. This whole week, I've been up at between 3:30 and 5, probably, depending on the day. But
and are you starting the grind at that time now, or just languishing?
No, I'm still languishing, but I languish anyway in the morning. So it gets it out of the way earlier so I can start earlier, if that makes sense. So, let's see, I got home last Saturday. My luggage just made it yesterday. So it came, they dropped it off super early. And, so I used that time. I was awake anyway. So I was able to get all my laundry done and through and put away and organized. And then I was able to go to work at a reasonable hour. So, trying to use that in my favor. The winter is harder because it's so dark up here. It's definitely easier in the summer. The sun comes up at 4:30. So it's easier to get up at 6 or 7 and start working. But
what happened to your luggage?
Okay. So this is just a pro tip. I usually carry on no matter how long my trip is. I travel a lot, fairly decent at packing and being able to carry on for trips. And when we left, I flew out of Edinburgh back to Vancouver and with a connection in London, and the Edinburgh flight was just chock-a-box full. So they were begging for volunteers to check their bags. And I was like, I don't really need anything in my bag. Anything of importance is mostly in my backpack. Like, I'll just check whatever. I also had a really tight turnaround at London Heathrow. So I thought, ooh, that'd be easier, getting through security if I don't have this roller bag with me.
Exactly.
So I checked it through to my final destination, get to London Heathrow, found out my flight had been delayed by 2 hours anyway. So I unexpectedly had way more time. So I'm like, whatever, I could have had my bag. I get to the Vancouver airport, had just cleared passport control, and I hear my name called. And I was like, that is never a good sign. So I go up to the baggage desk and he's like, yeah, London Heathrow just found your bag. And I was like, but I'm here. He's like, yep. Okay.
That was nice that they reported it missing for you, though.
Yes. And I didn't have to wait there for an hour until the dregs of the bags came out on the carousel. But, yeah, but it took 4 days to make it to me, which I was less than thrilled about. But at least I got it. I guess that's a good thing. But maybe I shouldn't name the airline I flew on, but because they probably listen. I know, right? Because all in all, I've had decent experiences on this airline. Sometimes not great. I'm also like a non-dairy vegetarian eater, so I always have to request special meals, and they have quote unquote lost my meal a couple of times. So like when you're on a 10-hour flight, that's pretty painful when you can't eat anything. Anyway, that's a different story. But I forgot what I was going to say, but I tweeted at them, and I hesitated because somebody once told me, a company that I was talking to about work, they once told me that they refuse to get on Twitter because they've been told that everybody just uses it to fire complaints at you. And I was like, okay, well, I use Twitter for more than that, but I do fire off complaints a lot on Twitter when I'm not happy with the company. So okay, I get it.
I've heard most people get responses though, so I think it's an effective way.
I agree, because it's public, which is why I did it. And I try to be nice. I just told them that was very uncool, that I volunteered to check my bag and they didn't make an effort to get it to me when they have 4 hours to get it on my connecting flight at London Heathrow. And they're like, yeah, that was pretty uncool. Do you have a case number for it already? Otherwise, we can help you out. And I was like, okay, that's not the point.
So it seemed like they were gonna help you out, and it seemed like they were being cool on Twitter, but then no, not so much.
Not so much. They're like, okay, glad you have a number for it. And I was like, no, that's beside the point. I want my bag here now. Like now.
Oh,
so
I can't believe it took so long.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's because I flew into Vancouver, Canada, and I live in the States. And so it came the next day into Vancouver, but apparently bags can't clear customs without a person or something in Vancouver. So then they had to send it to Victoria, where it could clear customs. And then from Victoria, they sent it to Seattle. And then I'm pretty sure from Seattle, they put it in a canoe or something and canoed it up the coast to Bellingham. I'm not quite sure because I lost track of it in Seattle. And it just took forever to make it all the way to my hometown. But
I hope everyone just got that same great visual.
Yeah. And then I got a phone call at 6:30 in the morning from the guy saying, I'm here with your bag. Can you let me in? Because I live in a gated community. So, and I was like, oh, okay, well, good thing I was up and heard my phone ring. Because who shows up at 6:30 in the morning to drop off a bag? I don't know. It was kind of a crazy. So pro tip, don't be the volunteer schmuck that volunteers to check your bag when they're calling out for them, because unless you have a direct flight. If you have a connection, I would recommend against it. But if you have a direct flight, it should be okay. But
wow. So that was obviously not a great trip back.
No, because then we were also 2 hours delayed due to, I think, mechanical failure on something. But although on the flip side, we got a newer plane, so that was nice. That
is good. I was going to say I would not want to ride in a plane that far that just had a repair done to it.
I know, right?
No, really, it's all good.
Yeah. And it's funny because I do love to travel so much, but I am not a huge fan of flying. It makes me nervous. It's car accidents and plane crashes are like two of my biggest fears probably. And just like all these mental images that go through my head. I'm like, every time I get on a plane, I said, well, this is probably it. It's such a terrible attitude to have, but
hey, but at least you get in there and you feel like you've got your boxes checked and you're like, I'm good with it.
True. I'm trying to check my boxes anyway. I'm pretty okay with where I'm at in life. So yes. Yeah, it's good.
So let's talk about some of your favorite places you've been. So you do travel a lot, but I just found out this not liking to fly part. That's new. So, but what are some of your favorite places, or what's your favorite place?
I don't really do favorites. It's usually whatever place I was last turns out to be my favorite.
Erica, they're not your kids. You can say you like one place better than the
other. No, I know. Generally, the places that I like more are the places that I have spent longer. So I really have a heart for Scotland. I lived in Glasgow for a couple of years. I got my master's degree at Glasgow Uni. So I really got a chance to like learn the culture and meet the natives and really kind of embed myself there. However, along with the Pacific Northwest, Scotland has terrible weather in terms of it just rains all the time and it really gets me down. So that is why I eventually left Scotland. I couldn't take the rain anymore, which when people hear that, they just laugh because I'm from the Pacific Northwest.
Exactly.
Like, doesn't it rain there? And I was like, yeah, but it's different.
It's getting better though, right? Even though climate change is a hoax.
Our summers are getting better. They're getting hotter and more sunny. Our winters, I haven't got a beat on that yet because we've had some super mild sunny winters. And then like last year we got a ton of snow, which is unusual for us because we're on the coast. So we tend to get more temperate weather, but I actually really like the snow, so I don't mind that. That excited me. So as long as it sticks to snow and not rain. Then
was there any snow left when you got back? Because it snowed while we were in London. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was all gone. We've had this last week. We've had massive windstorms and just rain, and it's been terrible. So yeah, I shouldn't admit this, but I've started putting the twinkle lights around the windows in preparation. I usually try to wait till after Thanksgiving before I do stuff like that, but it's just so dark and I needed a little cheer.
How dare you break out the Christmas decorations?
I know. But okay. But on that note, Edinburgh is like all decked out in Christmas stuff because they don't have Thanksgiving because that's an American holiday, right? So they go straight from Halloween and into Christmas. And so it was hard, like being around all the festive Christmas lights or whatever. And then you come home and it's just like darker than dark here and dreary and the wind is howling. And so, yeah. So I'm starting a little early this year. I'm sorry. But, yeah. Anyway, back to favorite places. I'm going to lump a whole continent in. I love Europe. Like I will go anywhere in Europe at the drop of a hat. And I'm sure, like I love Scandinavia, particularly Norway. It's just also not so great with the weather. I seem to be attracted to these northern places.
Yeah, you say you don't like it because of the weather, but apparently you do.
I know. It was so funny. I actually mentioned at Co-Garden last year, which is in Denmark, so Scandinavian place. I was talking to a Swedish guy and I mentioned that I would love to move to Norway. And he just laughed at me and said, why? I said, it's just so beautiful there. And he's like, well, when have you visited there? And I was like, only in June. So I've had decent weather. So I've never seen the flip side. Yeah. So I know they get longer, drearier days than we do, but it's beautiful. If you haven't been to Norway, you should definitely go in the summer. Unless you want to see the Northern Lights, which is on my bucket list too.
And is that primarily a winter thing, or like? Okay, so I'm so ignorant to so many things.
It has to be dark, right? I think it goes on year round, but you can't see it because the sun. So my first time in Norway, it was like the height of summer. So it was, and I went up. I have family actually in Tromsø, which is way far north in Norway, up in the Arctic Circle. And so it was 24-hour sun, and it was just so disorienting, amazing. Yeah. So it was kind of crazy because I was staying with my family. I call them my cousins, but I think it's my mom's cousin twice removed or something. I can't remember the family connection, but so she's like more my mom's age, and we'd be sitting on the couch chatting with the family or whatever, and she's like, let's go chase the sun. So we'd like leave at like midnight or something and go quote unquote chase the sun around the islands or whatever, because it comes down to the horizon, but it's still like light out. And so we'd like drive around the islands for a couple of hours, and we get home at like 2 a.m. or something like that, and I'm just like dead tired, and I would sleep till, I don't know, 11 or noon the next day, but she'd be up at like 8 or 9 baking a cake for her church group or something. And I was like, oh shoot, should I have gotten up to help you? Like, here's the young one that's just like, I need to sleep. And she's just carrying on. So it was super cool to see that. So yeah, I'd love to go back there in the winter to see the Northern Lights.
Ooh, it'd be cold. Well. Cold.
Since you're so far north. Yeah, it'd be super cold. I would probably have to mentally justify buying new winter clothes for myself.
I think you would. It wouldn't even be mental justify. I think you'd probably be required to.
Right.
Authentic gear.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, do you ever get south of the equator?
I do. Not often, though. Let's see. Well, last year I went to Australia and New Zealand.
Oh, that's right.
And that was amazing. And actually, if I were going to move abroad, New Zealand is probably top of my list of places to move. It was just awesome. I loved it.
Are they cool with letting outsiders come in, or is that a tough sell?
I know that was that earlier this year. I think it was earlier this year. Wellington actually did a worldwide call for tech people, because Wellington is kind of the tech quote unquote capital of New Zealand, I guess. So they were actually headhunting the world to bring in tech people, and I got really excited about it, because how they worded it, they were like every what is the word I'm looking for? Help me out. Every niche is not the right word I want, but every discipline in the tech industry. So I'm like, oh, sweet. They must be wanting like designers as well. And, but then their system was down for a while, so I couldn't register. And then by the time I was able to register, it was like at the end of the call, and I started reading through like what they wanted, and they wanted like IT people. So I'm like,
right.
That's not every
discipline.
They
wanted hardcore tech.
Yeah. I was like, okay, whatever. But, yeah. So as a freelancer, I'd have to hire an immigration lawyer probably, which is fine. Or I could try to get a job at a company, and then they would sponsor you. So it would make it.
Yeah. I was looking at property in Huddersfield. I would love to, but you just can't pick up and move.
Isn't that beautiful there? Yeah.
But you just can't pick up and move. That's the part that sucks.
Yeah. I'm kind of a huge proponent of just open borders. I know that scares people, but if you really my background's in economic development. And so if you really look at the economics of what that would mean for the world, you might get an initial influx of people fleeing certain countries and entering other countries. But I think in the end, if you could wait it out long enough, it would totally even out and
it would totally stabilize. Yeah.
And countries wouldn't be flooded, and then you'd be able to just go wherever you wanted. I just feel like it's weird just because I was born in the States, that means I have to live in the States. I mean, I know it doesn't mean I have to live in the States, but
it's really hard not to.
I don't know how people do it. Yeah. I don't know how people do it, to be honest. And maybe I just haven't looked into it hard enough, but
crazy.
I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right, you talked about economics. So is that what your master's is in?
Yes, I have a master's in economic development. Yeah.
And why did you go to Glasgow for that? Glasgow.
I wanted a non-U.S. perspective. I don't really like U.S. foreign policy. I don't agree with it most of the time. So I wanted a different perspective on how other countries look at foreign policy and how they look at development in other countries around the world. So that was my main criteria for that. So I applied to a couple schools and ended up at Glasgow University for that.
What are some of the other places that you applied?
The other one, it was just one other place. It was University of Kent, which is a English school, but their program was actually located in Belgium, which I thought would be super cool. And it was because it was a English school. The program was in English, and Belgium is the capital of the EU. So I thought that would be cool. But the reason I didn't pick that one is because there was this was a long time ago. So I don't know what the platform was, but it was kind of like a chat platform forum or whatever, where prospective students or anybody in the program that year could, meet each other before they actually met each other. And like, these people were so pretentious in the chat room. They were just like spouting off all their nerdy books that they've read and the things that they've done. And I was like, these are not my people. So, so I was like, well,
it's good that you got that preview. That's awesome.
Yeah. I think I might have been uncomfortable. I mean, these were like, I don't know, because at the time, like my heart was really I had a save the world mentality. I still do in some ways, but I wanted to work for nonprofits, essentially, and how do we bring clean water into villages in Africa that need it, or how do we set up microloans for women, so they can stabilize their families and raise their children, and all these people were in the Belgium program were probably more of the want to be the powerful politicians and whatever. And I was like, yeah, it's not me. So I met some really good people in Scotland. So I think that was the wise choice.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So how does that economics master's, like, how does that bridge to UX, UI, running my own company?
Totally doesn't. How did I make that jump? I worked in an office before I went to grad school, and we had an in-house designer, and it was a woman actually, and she was awesome. And we had the same Myers-Briggs personality type, if anybody's familiar with that. And we just totally clicked. I spent a lot of time in her office just chatting with her. And I had never really heard of like the whole web design industry. Like, it's just not something that occurred to me because this was a long time ago. And so I guess that just percolated in the back of my mind. And I went off to grad school, and then wanted to stay in Scotland longer. So I was looking for jobs, and this goes back to the whole visa thing. I had a legit visa to work there and to be there for X amount of years, but nobody wanted to hire me because I was American, and they just didn't want to take that on. I'm like, but I have a visa. And they're like, yeah, but it expires in 2 years. And then what do we do? And I'm like, how do you know this is going to work out for 2 years? And anyway, I had a hard time finding a job. So I don't know. I was still thinking about that web design thing. And I got on lynda.com. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but it's they have tutorials on just about everything these days, I think. Did you know that got bought by LinkedIn now? Oh, I didn't. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's part of LinkedIn Learning now.
Oh, that kind of makes me like it less. Anyway.
Exactly.
It was great at the time. I don't know. So I started teaching myself how to code HTML and CSS and how to use Photoshop. And when I decided to move back to the States, I took some additional classes just at the community college, learning more about the Adobe suite because it's really robust, and I was finding it hard to learn on my own. I needed a little direction. And then after that, I went out and I got a job, and it clicked more so than the economic development stuff was. I don't know. I just struggled with that.
So how did you land that first like design tech gig? Like just fill out the application and
kind of not really. No, let's see. How did the program director at the community college emailed me and said, "Hey, I heard this agency is looking for someone. You should apply." And I said, okay. And I thought that was great because I was kind of an anomaly at the community college because I wasn't actually doing the program. I'm like, I already have 2 degrees. Like, I don't feel like I need a AA and graphic design or whatever. So can I just take the classes? And they're like, okay, that's really weird. But yeah, as long as they're not full, you can take them. But I guess they really liked me because when they reached out to me and said, hey, we heard this agency is hiring, you should apply. And I said, okay. So I applied, and then they were like, yeah, we're not hiring. And I was like, okay. And then the community college reached out again and said, hey, one of the people from the agency that we told you about is giving a presentation at the community college. You should come. So I said, okay. So I went. And I listened to the presentation, and then I went up to her afterwards and I introduced myself and I said, hey, I applied for a job. I thought there was a job, but you told me there wasn't, but I just wanted to meet you face to face so you knew who I was. And she's like, great, that's awesome. Didn't hear from them. So I started to try to freelance, but I was new in the industry, right? I had no contacts, so it wasn't going very well. Plus I'm an introvert. And so I was like, that whole cold calling thing was just like, no. So it was 10 months later, and they called me and they said, hey, we have a job opening. Do you still need a job? And I said, yep, I do. And I worked there for 6 years. So yeah, it was kind of strange how that came about. And then
that's amazing.
If I could pivot that, through that job, I met Janae and Kyle, and together, 2.5 years ago, we launched Skrift, which is an Umbraco community magazine online, skrift.io. And so we curate articles about Umbraco or about the tech industry, or maybe their lifestyle articles, and we publish them for the Umbraco community for a knowledge sharing kind of platform.
And that's monthly, right?
And that is monthly. We release the first Tuesday of every month, and then we also have a newsletter that we're trying to build subscriptions to. So we send that out twice a month, actually. So you'll get one when there's a release, and it's just a reminder that there's new articles, and here's a snippet. And we also do a roundup of other things going on in the community, whether they're other blog articles that people have written, or videos, or new packages for Umbraco, as well as any upcoming festivals and Umbraco trainings. So we do that twice a month. Once with the release, we have that in there, and then we do a mid-month one just for kind of a latest roundup of the goings-ons in the community. So it's pretty cool. It's been an interesting ride because it's a side project for us, and so trying to allocate enough time to it so it grows, but then we also have day jobs as well to pay the bills. Yeah, it's been a good project though. It keeps me plugged into the Umbraco community, especially since I'm not a developer. So I don't know, helps me stay involved.
So how does that start? Like, you, Kyle, and Janae are sitting around one day and somebody says, hey, we should start a magazine.
Yeah, kind of. Actually, we the agency that all three of us worked for, we spun up the North American Umbraco Festival and ran that for the first 2 years. And the UK festival, they have such huge success, and but they're a small country, right? So it's easy to hop on a train and go for a one-day festival. And I think it was after the first year of the North American one, Kyle and I were talking, and we're like, how do we, it's so hard to ramp up for the US or the North American festival. And it's hard to keep people's interests and draw them out because we have such a big country and it's such a long ways to go, and justifying that to your boss is really hard. And so we were just kicking around ideas on how to kind of keep people's interests the year round, so we wouldn't have as hard of a time pumping people up for the next festival. And Skrift was born. We've kind of modeled it after a list apart in a lot of ways, because they also have an event apart, and they have a book apart, and they have this whole suite of things that they do. So that was really our inspiration, is to tie in magazine and useful articles with being able to advertise about the festivals and stuff. So It's a lot easier to advertise for the North American festival or even the UK festival, because all three of us went to that. So it's easy for that. But I do struggle with the other festivals that I don't go to, like trying to connect with them and make sure that they get the same amount of attention as the ones that I do go to. It's kind of a struggle and work in progress. But
I feel like the momentum's building, though, and a lot of the other festivals are getting on board with reaching out to you guys and saying, "Hey, we'd love to be in."
Yeah. The UK Fest, they've definitely been the best about like contacting us, and it always makes it easier when they contact us, but not a lot of people do. We still have to go out and contact a lot of people for writing articles or we try to do like a little on the mid-month newsletter. We try to do like a little mini feature of something too. And that's, again, always easier when people reach out and say, "Hey, I have this idea and I want some publicity." And we're like, "Great, let us help you out for that." But it's me trying to get these things on my calendar so I don't forget about them, I think. And I give about enough ramp up time for them to produce something and get me something to put in the newsletter. But I'm trying. So
and you've written,
like I failed.
You've written for it too, right? You have not failed, by the way. You're doing great.
Oh, I feel like I failed at the end of this year, kind of. But I feel like I got busy, so I feel like I've dropped the ball a couple times, but we are trying. Like I said, it is a volunteer. We're self-funded, and it's a volunteer thing. So it's, it's hard.
And how many articles have you written for Skrift?
I've written 2.
And what were those about?
What were they about? Let's see. The first one was I called it the 6 degrees of separation. And I think that was when we first launched. The 3 of us each wrote an article the first 3 months as kind of an introduction of who the editors are, who's behind it, kind of thing. So, I think that was just more about like, the connections that I've made in my life due to my travels and the people that I've met and how those connections just kind of play out and influence your life. I think that was more or less what it was about.
So that was definitely kicking off the lifestyle aspect then of the magazine. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And the other one I think I wrote one in January of this year. And it was kind of a ramp up for festivals because there were, 3 Umbraco festivals, I think, at the beginning of the year. Then there's Code Garden in the summer. And then there's like I think there's 3 or 4 festivals in the fall. So it was kind of a piece on why they're important, why you should go to them. Also because it was in the ramp up of the North American Festival, because that was in March this last year. How to justify it to your boss and how to get them to send you. And I picked up tips from that actually from UIE. If anybody's heard of that organization, User Interface Engineering, I think. They do a series of articles like that too, how to talk your boss into letting you go. They are one of the most expensive conferences that I've ever seen.
My boss is a huge fan.
I was actually able to go a couple of years ago. It blew my mind. It totally changed how I run projects and how I do things. Like, it was amazing. And to me, it was worth every penny. But I took their blog posts and I wrote out an email, this really long email, and I did all the costs out and said, this is what it's going to cost you. This is why I think it's important. This is what I'm going to give back to the company after I get back, and all the things that I'm going to do to share all the knowledge that I gained and how I justify my costs. And my boss at first said, no. But then came back 2 weeks later and said, yeah, okay. And so I was like, oh my gosh, it worked. So I kind of took that and Umbracofied it and turned it around to the Umbraco community, say, hey, this worked for me. And Umbraco festivals are substantially less money to go to. So you should just go. So I don't know if it worked. I don't know if anybody reads us. But actually, interestingly enough, because I also did that for year 2 for the North American Festival, and I put a bunch of information out like that too. And Umbraco picked it up.
Yeah, I feel like I remembered that.
Yeah, they picked that up and put their own spin on it and did that. So Yeah, I think that's good. People need tools to help them justify these expenses to their company. So I think that's great.
Oh, especially if you're a first time, like if you're going to a conference for the very first time, you have no idea how to tee it up with your boss.
Right. Exactly.
So you've also presented at conferences around the world, basically. I guess you can definitely see you're a global speaking sensation.
Yes. So I don't know about sensation, but definitely a global.
Just go ahead and throw that in
international speaker.
My friends are amazing. We're going to say you're a global speaking sensation.
Perfect.
So what are some of the topics that you've spoken on?
Okay. So the two most near and dear to my heart, I did 2016 at Co-Garden and also 2016 at U West Fest, and they were similar but different. But they were about inclusivity. So the one at U West Fest was more general in terms of being inclusive to women and people of color. In the tech industry. And then I was approached by HQ to revamp that and to do a women's only version for Co-Garden, which turned out to be harder than I thought. It turned into kind of a completely separate talk instead of being able to cannibalize some of the work I've already done. But
it always goes that way. You think you can just dovetail off one and be like halfway done? No, never works.
Yeah. Someday I want to get to that level where I can just reuse one of my talks, because I put so many hours into them. I treated them like research projects and research papers, and I think they turned out pretty awesome. And I also learned a lot from them too. And it's a very sensitive topic to be presenting to a predominantly male audience, because I didn't want to feel like I was male bashing, but at the same time, I wanted to say, listen, guys, there's a problem in the tech industry, and it's not even just the tech industry; it's in society, to be honest. But to make it more relatable, obviously, I was going to talk about the tech industry, but there's a problem. There's a problem on how we speak to each other. There's a problem still with the good old boys club kind of thing. And there's a problem with how we write our job advertisements, and we use more male language when writing those. And so women are choosing to self-select out of the job pool. One of the excuses that I hear a lot is like, well, I would hire a woman, but we just don't get any that apply. And so that makes me stop and say, like, well, how are you writing your job advertisement then? Did you ever think that it was something that you're doing on your end while there's no women applying? Because there are women out there in this industry. There are really smart women out there. So both talks were presenting a case for what your ROI would be if you had women on board in your companies. And then what are some of the things that are holding us back from getting to that level? So I got a lot of support after both of those, but I got a lot of pushback as well, which is to be expected, but I can't say that I wasn't disheartened by it at the same time, because I feel like I have to justify my job and what I do to people. And I know men say that to me as well, but it's not to the same level, because I have witnessed some really bad pitches by men, but then they're like, oh, let's just go play golf. And then they come away with, $100,000 deal. And I can't do that. If I do a pitch, and no matter how good it is, I still probably won't win the job.
Right.
Which is probably, again, why I'm approaching my business the way that I am and trying to get in with agencies and developers. So I'm not actually pitching projects. I might be pitching my portion of a greater project, but I don't have to pitch the whole project. Which is unfortunate.
Now, the pushback that you got, though, it was from men, right? It wasn't from women that were in the crowd.
Yes.
And the pushback
the women.
Go ahead.
The women were actually like, hey, thanks for bringing this up and addressing the elephant in the room. This actually makes me feel more comfortable being in such a minority at this festival. So that was really good. Pushback mostly came from men. they don't get it. And I get that on the level of, well, you're not a woman. You're never going to be in a situation like I'm in. And so how do you develop that empathy? And it's usually the men that have daughters are the ones that tend to get it because they don't want their daughters treated that way.
Well, that's the entire definition of privilege. The guys were probably coming up and saying, well, no, it doesn't really happen like that. We get that too. And well, no, you don't. And,
exactly. Yeah. No, you don't. You have no idea. No idea. So it was kind of interesting. And it's something that I would absolutely love to talk about again, but I'm not quite sure how to spin the topic to bring a fresh approach to it, So it's not like, I don't feel like I can just cannibalize the same talk and give it in the same place in a different year. Maybe I can. Maybe there's a different enough audience.
But you could always hopefully add to it and say, hey, these are things that have possibly changed, hopefully for the better, maybe for the worse since the last time I spoke on this topic. And here's how we can continue to try to make it change. Maybe.
Yeah, I haven't seen that happen yet. It's a slow moving thing. And I hate to bring politics up right now, but I feel like with the current US political climate, it's not helping either.
It's definitely not speeding things up.
No, if anything, it's setting us back a little bit, but it's something that I will continue to advocate for in any way that I can. And if it's just one-on-one conversations with people, that's really great. I think one of the greatest compliments I had. So I gave this talk in 2016 at Co-Garden, and I ran into someone 2017 who saw my talk in 2016. He's like, hey, because of your talk, I went out and specifically looked at what we were doing in our hiring practices and whatever. And we hired some women, and I was like, that's amazing. Thanks for taking that to heart. It's great. So really kind of evaluating how his company was searching for people and trying to make a change in that. And I thought that was really great.
And that's how the world changes, one person at a time.
And that's, yeah, it's totally true.
It's slow. I think that when there's 7 billion of us, it's slow, but that's how it changes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, women can fight for this all they want, but men just hear nagging. So I really feel strongly that it's men who need to step up and lead this at the same time. I don't want women to stop fighting, but it tends to mean, and I hate saying this because it tends to mean more when it comes from a man.
It needs to be a people voice. It needs to, regardless of your gender or any of that kind of stuff, it needs to be one voice that we've got to level the playing field. Everyone has to have an equal shot.
Yeah.
And right now it's not.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Yeah. For XYZ reasons, but.
Oh, ABCD XYZ reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't. Maybe I will write a follow-up Skrift article on that and try to bring that back around.
Definitely, it was awesome to find out that was really meant to be like a festival promo reminder vehicle more than It's really it's blossomed into something pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a fun project, to be honest. It's, but then on the flip side, there's so much in our want to do queue right now that I think we haven't really moved forward with it much because I think we got a little overwhelmed by how much we want to do. So just do nothing.
But that's also though to have you got to have a long-term vision and goal. You got to have a want to do list that you can't accomplish. Because what happens when you're done with it? Then you're kind of like, eh. And then it folds.
Or we could find a way to monetize it and sell it. No, I don't know.
That's an actual recurring theme in a lot of the conversations I've been having is people are trying to find a way to make money while they sleep. That's the whole. Yeah. And everyone's I think a lot of us have that as our next.
Yeah.
Universally, nobody wants to keep doing the same thing that they're doing right now. No. What's the next thing?
I want to travel just to travel, not travel to work.
Well, it sounds like you're almost traveling just to travel right now, and then you just pepper it in with a few weeks of work to get the next trip.
Yeah, it's true. I do. I live for my trips. And because I don't have anything concrete planned, even though I just got home, I start going stir crazy. What am I going to do? I don't have a trip planned. What am I going to do? But
well, the only question that I haven't asked that's on my show notes is what was Erica like when she was in high school? Because you've mentioned the introverts and all, we've gotten hints of your travel and stuff. So what was Erica like as a sophomore through senior in high school?
Thanks for leaving out freshman year. That's just awkward for everybody.
No, that doesn't count. Yeah, it's a transition year. We don't talk about that year.
I was actually, despite being an introvert, I was actually pretty popular. I found my niche, I guess. And I had several, actually. But I was on the dance team. So we did halftime shows at the football games and basketball games. And I was in concert choir. And we got to travel for that. So I got to go to Disneyland one year for that. That was awesome. And then also in the honors programs in school. So you kind of I had my niche and I had a lot of friends, and I don't think that I was one of the mean girls, even though I probably was, but
we were all one of the mean girls.
I know, because kids are just mean.
Yes.
But, I would like to say that I had solid friends and in diverse groups, because I always have diverse pursuits. So I know some people view choir as being nerdy, and I'm like, whatever. I love to sing, so whatever.
Nerdy's
but then
awesome.
on the flip side, I was on the dance team, which was we were better dancers than cheerleaders, so we were more popular in that respect.
You just threw that gauntlet down.
I did.
I'm going to get so much viewer hate mail for that.
Yeah. Well, we were pretty damn good, so. Or we like to think that we were anyway. So, all
right. So I realized I didn't ask you about the Nashville years and the singing, but I think we're going to save that for
next time.
I always reserve the right to recall a guest.
Yes.
So we've got plenty that we can cover in another episode for sure. The Nashville years. The very last question that I ask is, if, it's totally putting you on the spot, but can you think of somebody that we possibly both know that you would think would be a good match for this podcast?
So I have been listening to your podcast since you launched. I'm one. Yep. And
you're the one.
I know
Thanks.
that you asked. I know I'm the one consistent. I know that you asked this, and I have just been racking my brain, trying to come up with somebody amazing. And I was trying to come up with somebody that you didn't know that I could introduce you to, but all the people that I would want to talk to, I don't know them either. So that'd be an awkward thing. So who I came up with and who came to the forefront of my mind, because I just spent some time with him, is Barry O'Kane. And I know you know him.
Oh, yeah. Happy Porch Radio, Barry.
Happy Porch Radio, Barry. And the reason I say that is because he is the one who recently told me that I need to go for a month if I think that I'm going to be able to work. And
I wondered who gave you that. Okay.
Yeah, it was Barry O'Kane. And he actually splits his time between Scotland and Australia. And so I'm actually interested. He's got more of the digital nomad life thing buttoned down. So I just saw him in Scotland, spent some time with him. And so picked his brain a little bit, but I would actually like to know more about his lifestyle so I can start emulating it. So
I will definitely put him on the list.
My recommendation. Yeah.
I actually just listened to his his season 3, episode 1 podcast today. So.
Oh, is it out?
Yeah, actually it was out, I think today or yesterday, but yeah.
Oh, I thought it was next week. I'll have to get on that.
Businesses with, you'll love it because it's agencies with a conscious slant, to make the world better.
Oh.
So.
Oh, yeah. I would like that. I would like to be able to blend my save the world mentality, economic development with my digital advertising. That would be awesome. So definitely check that out.
There's definitely going to be some education then, because the first episode was all about how to do that. So Perfect. Maybe not how to, but this is how that agency did it, kind of thing. So
right. Perfect.
All right. Well, we are about an hour and 10 minutes in. How did that feel?
Pretty good. I feel like I talked a lot.
Nope, that's why you're on.
Point, right?
You're on to talk. Yes, exactly.
Perfect.
I ask the questions, you answer, and hopefully it's lengthy. So that worked out perfectly. Yeah. Well, I just want to say thanks again for being on, and we'll definitely do this again. And you got anything you want to close out with?
No. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Always happy to be on again.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Well, a huge thanks to Erica for joining me on the podcast this week, and actually very excited to revisit some of the topics and discuss some new stuff when I have her on the cast again. Thanks to the podcast sponsor, socialimposter.com. If you have social media profiles and you want to protect your online reputation of those social media profiles and make sure that people are not impersonating you online, socialimposter.com is the place for you. Also, thanks to everyone for listening, and let's see if we can share the love and get these subscribes up and get these listens up. I'm excited to have another podcast coming out next week during the Thanksgiving break, and stay tuned for more fun. Thanks.